Hi, folks. It's 10:11 p.m. on Sunday night, and I don't have a mind to tech right tonight, so I just thought I'd come on air again and do another podcast, or do a podcast because the discussions are different than podcasts. You know, I enjoy them, but they're not the same as a podcast. But they're fun, you know, have people come on and that sort of thing. So I've titled this podcast The Sunday Sermon because Sunday is when we used to gather as communities and I guess you could say share our highest ideals. If you want to be a little bit more cynical, you could say, you know, reinforce the programming. You know, I guess it all depends on your state of consciousness. Remember, the very same thing that holds some people down lifts other people up. So nothing is universally bad or good. It's always something I try to remember, you know, as I go through this wacky life, this strange and wacky existence. I try to think sometimes, and you know what I mean when I say think, right? It's more like the contemplation exercise. You got to be so careful. Every little word we use has multiple meanings. Everything we say can be taken the wrong way. It's kind of amazing the way that works, actually. You know, and we're governed by words. Even with all the technology, we are still governed by words. And old words, words written down a long time ago. Amazing how that works, right? In some ways, we don't have the intelligence that the earth had 2,000 years ago when it saw the great magicians of Egypt 2,500 years ago, when the world saw the Christ. All the prophets leading up to the Christ. How is it that we could lose that intelligence, which seems in many ways far greater than anything we've done today, all the material breakthroughs, which are really not that surprising. Everything pivots off of consciousness. So the name of the game now is to do for you what you can't do for yourself. That's what the AI will do. But it'll atrophy you, just like we've become physically atrophied by the convenient world we've created from the middle of the 20th century until now. We've become physically atrophied. I don't know if you guys have these, like, stories in your families. I have them. I had a great-grandfather, and his name was Johnny Peter MacDonald. And he was born and raised in northern Quebec, up around a place called Arvida, Chicoutimi. Not many of you would know of such a place because I imagine if you listen to me, you don't speak French. And if you don't speak French, you probably don't know the geography of Quebec that well. Why would you, when you think about it? And Johnny Peter was a bit of a legend in the family. I was told about him by my great aunts in the 11th grade when we got an assignment in our sociology class to do our family trees and to see how many generations back we could go. I think I did pretty good. Right, so the McDonalds came over in, I think 1798 is when they left Scotland. And my mother comes from a line of people called the Rosses, R-O-S-S. And another Scottish clan. And I think the furthest we went back was 1798. Now, Johnny Peter, he probably would have been born around I don't know, like 1860, 1870, sometime around there. His son, my grandfather, died in 1969 at the age of about 63. So you got to figure he had his child when he was 30, 25, 30. I don't know how many brothers or sisters my grandfather had. My grandmother, yeah. It's amazing like how little we even know about the bloodlines we come from. The only people who really keep these records are nobility and Jews, because bloodline is a big deal for them. Johnny Peter was the archetype of this genealogy I occupy, the MacDonald genealogy. And I say he was the archetype because he was like a high expression of the genealogy. We're not big people, like 5'7", 5'8", but extremely preternaturally strong and preternaturally tough. And Johnny Peter was the archetype. He was known for a couple 100 kilometers in all directions. North, south, west, east. He was a tree scaler. That's the guy in the lumber company who goes up the tree and cuts the top part off. And then they cut the bottom. Now, this would have been before chainsaws. So imagine January, February, December, northern Quebec, because you can only cut wood in the winter because you need sleds to pull the wood out with the horses. It's funny that the family I married into here in Costa Rica is a woodcutting family as well. My father-in-law raised 11 kids cutting hardwood in the rainforest, going in with a couple mules and a chainsaw. And one good tree, like one good-sized Coca-Cola tree, could feed 11 kids for 6 months. That's how expensive hardwood was. Can't do it anymore, though. Costa Rica changed all the laws. A couple of my brothers-in-laws, they still cut wood. You're allowed to cut wood for personal use if you live on the land. So I live a very old-fashioned Costa Rican life. I live in a part of Costa Rica where people still live the old way. And I married into a very old family here. And they cut wood. I still have brothers-in-laws who hunt. And hunting is illegal in Costa Rica unless it's for sustenance. And then you can still hunt. So they go out in the bush, and they go after an animal called piscuate, which is, it's kind of like a pig, but it's got a snout. And they hunt wild pig as well. Chancho de la montaña, pig of the mountain. So there's hunting dogs in the family over across the way there. There's a pen of hunting dogs. They got about 5 hunting dogs. They'll have a couple hound dogs, really good noses, and they go into the jungle. Very dangerous. Very dangerous to hunt wild pigs in Central America. People have been seriously, seriously hurt hunting wild pigs. I think some people in history here have been killed. Nobody in my family. But you can get hurt. Very often they lose a dog or two on a hunt because the dogs get to the pig first, and the pig can gore 1 or 2 dogs before you get in there with the gun, catch up to the dogs. So imagine running through the rainforest. Just imagine running through the rainforest, right? That's what they do. And sometimes, like when one of my brothers-in-laws, they want to cut wood or something, they go way into the bush, like a couple kilometers, to get themselves a nice piece of hardwood. All the wood in my project, like my ceiling and everything, this desk I'm at, all cut from wood up here. So Johnny Peter would go up these trees about 100 feet, and he'd have the safety belt, and he'd have the spike boots on. And he would manually saw the top 30, 40, 50 feet off a tree. He's 100 feet up in the air. And he's scaling the tree in like minus 30, minus 40 degree weather. This is his job. Now imagine you make one mistake and the top of the tree falls on top of you. You know, the stuff people could do physically, it's mind-boggling. I talk about that on my podcast sometimes, like the stamina of the natives. They're nothing to look at. When you look at them, you don't think they're formidable people at all. Okay? You get out into that jungle, they'll bury anybody. They'll bury triathlon winners in San Francisco. I promise you. They would, if we were to do like a paintball game up here with teams of 12 and set the paintball region like, I don't know, maybe 5 by 5 kilometers, 25 square kilometers. I don't think there's a special forces team in the world that could beat 12 of these natives. Formidable, formidable people. Where the body is strong, the spirit is strong. I sometimes wax on here like an idiot, you know. Get to the point, Bruce. Where the body is strong, the spirit is strong. My great-grandfather, Johnny Peter, was famous for getting drunk and getting into bar fights, and he could kick the shit out of 4 or 5 people. The dude was a legend. Like, I'm not joking. He was known for a couple 100 kilometers in every direction from where he lived. and he moved around a lot, went where the work was. He ended up being killed by his own brother, who was a police officer, had gone down to Montana, Yellowstone country, if you watch that TV show. And Johnny Peter had gone down there and been Johnny Peter and kicked the shit out of a bunch of people. And he was to be arrested, and he wasn't cooperating, so his own brother was the police officer, the sheriff, and cracked him on the back of the head with one of those police billy clubs and killed him. Real Cain and Abel stuff, right? This is my bloodline. Kind of amazing when you think about it. And the reason I told that little story and I segued into the natives and everything is I was talking about atrophication. So we have physically atrophied. We're not physically the same men our grandfathers were. Unless your grandfather was a civil servant in the British or the Parisian bureaucracy, then you're probably, And none of this gym nonsense makes up for it either. Don't for a minute think these Joe Rogan types are old world men. They're not. An old world man would kick the shit out of them. I'm not joking. These were men. Remember, people do the most extraordinary things when nobody tells them they can't. Now we raise our children and we tell them everything that they have to be getting. Oh, you shouldn't be working more than 8 hours a day. You should get 2 15-minute breaks and a 30-minute lunch. And they have to pay you, and the labor unions come in. And I'm not saying that's a bad thing. Don't see this as a political conversation. It isn't. But we've just gotten weaker and weaker and weaker and weaker. We're nowhere near the men we were 100 years ago, North Americans. You don't have to be Taylor Sheridan to know that. He's the guy that writes and directs Yellowstone, by the way, as well as a number of other TV series. He's everywhere now. I'm leading to this. What happens when they start atrophying the mind and the imagination with AI? It's one thing to say, okay, we've changed physically. We're not the physical species we were before. But what about consciousness itself? What happens when all that stuff starts becoming easier and easier and easier? Nobody wants to do their research anymore. Nobody wants to read anymore. Reading made me the man I am. It's one of the things that made me the man I am. Reading is extremely important. I can't imagine not understanding Shakespeare. I can't even imagine people who get through life not understanding Shakespeare. Shakespeare's been that impactful on my life. Don't get me wrong, it's not all the flowery language and shit like that. The Elizabethan language, I couldn't give a rat's ass. Iambic pentameter, I couldn't give a rat's ass. It's his insight into human nature and his spiritual nature as well that it makes him so exceptional. Like I said, you look at the New Age movement these days. You look at all these readers and so-called healers and all this. They're really no different than the witches at the beginning of Macbeth. And everybody who comes into contact with them and takes their counsel will suffer a fate similar to Macbeth's. Because we're not supposed to get knowledge that way. Otherwise, this whole thing down here doesn't work. We don't learn our lessons. We don't grow. I could be wrong. I could be wrong. Could be we're going to a new and magnificent state of consciousness, but I don't see how a higher consciousness would even be needed here. I think the consciousness and the environment and the experience of a physical human life is all perfectly proportionate. And I think the people who think otherwise are just long overdue to leave this place, but just don't have the humility to do it the right way and just keep stepping on the flypaper. Okay? I think the Jews should have been gone 1,000 years ago with what they know. Shouldn't be reincarnating here anymore. Okay? I guess the Buddhists come back as a voluntary oath, right? At least the Tibetans, until all sentient life is liberated, they'll keep coming back here. You ever think about that? Just stop and think about that for a second. They are committed to reincarnating here until all sentient life is liberated. But how's that even possible? New life is coming into the beginning of the life spectrum all the time. New minerals. Animals are being born all the time. New species are being created. We only talk about extinction, but new species are created all the time. I honestly don't think we understand anything about this planet. We think we do. In our arrogance. We think we do. But I'm not sure that's true. There's this thing going on now. I've seen it happen 3 or 4 times where species of animals deemed extinct 150, 200 years ago are being seen again. I've seen a couple examples in Costa Rica. Costa Rica has a lot of cats, okay, like jungle cats. The biggest and the most fierce is the jaguar. A black panther is a mutated jaguar, by the way. That's all it is. If you were to get up close to one, tranquilize it, and look at its belly, you'd see the outlines of the, very, very faintly, you'd see that jaguar dotted pattern that they have. The orange and black and yellow and all that stuff, the colors of the jaguar. The black is just a mutation. We have mountain lions, so jaguars, mountain lions, pumas, ocelots, other things like lynxes, and then there's all these other cats that are just unique to this area of Costa Rica and northern Panama, southern Costa Rica and northern Panama. When I went to El Salvador for that 3-day trip, I asked all the Uber drivers, I said, you guys got jaguars here? And they said no. So they don't even go up that far. And I don't know if they have them in Colombia. Probably they do. There's a lot of jungle in Colombia. Colombia is a vast, wild place. I'd love to go there one day. Time permitting, you know. I'm getting a little bit long in the tooth now. Right? Much closer to my 60th decade, my 6th decade than I am the beginning of my 5th. I had a beautiful sauna today. Just love the sauna. Had to change my routine a little bit. So when I finish a sauna now, I cut a lemon in half and squeeze it into a glass, and I put a little bit of, we call it dulce. Dulce just means sweet, but it's the word they use for brown sugar here, and it comes from sugar cane. It's unrefined sugar. And then I just put a pinch of salt in, and I add water and stir it all up. And it's like nature's Gatorade. It replaces all my electrolytes. It would be better if I had like a Himalayan or a Celtic salt rather than just regular table salt, but I do what I can, right? I think this life is a miracle. I think human beings are a miracle. Each and every human being, even the bad ones, even the Al Capones, even the Hillary Clintons. In my own weird way, I love each and every human being because I think each and every human being is a walking miracle. That this bipedal hominid could scuttle about this planet and write the I Ching and do all these wacky things, you know? Let me see if I have something to show you here. I downloaded it, but I may have, in my zeal, erased over it. Yeah, I erased over it. They have come up with a photo of quantum entanglement. And it is literally, I'm not joking, it's literally the yin-yang symbol from Taoism. I saw it on Joe Rogan. And Joe Rogan could hardly believe it himself. It's like some great closing is coming now, right? I think we're going to make it because there's a lot of good signs out there that we're going to make it. And by make it, I mean return to internally directed lives and a respect for the internal life. And not just use the internal life as a kind of inner architecture entrained by engineering and computer science and medical schools and law schools, but the true nature of our inner lives is going to be restored because the evil is going away. We're watching it now in real time. Don't get too attached and don't judge, or you'll get sucked in. It's like a black hole. But the evil is going away now. I don't think I have to say anything out loud. I think you all know what I'm referring to. And that's why we haven't been growing. Because we've been put into structures that deliberately thwart it. We've been put into societies that humiliate people who have natural intelligence. And before the humiliation, it could be worse. It was worse. It was burning, torture, all of these sorts of things, right? The Inquisitions, called them witches. That's not to say that witchcraft doesn't exist, but let me tell you something about true witchcraft. The witch punishes themselves. You don't have to hunt them down. Okay? They all get hit by trains eventually, just like the psychics. Because that's not the way to live. And incorrect living has consequences. As above, so below. If you eat like a shitheel, you're going to get diabetes, type 2 diabetes in your 50s. If you smoke like a chimney, you're going to get emphysema, you're going to get COPD, or you're going to get lung cancer. We all understand this, right? Natural consequence to action. You think it doesn't apply to consciousness and witchcraft? Of course it does. Everything down here is self-regulating. The real evil is the stuff we've been entrained to believe. That's the real evil. And that's all going away now too. Now I think after the last few podcasts, you might understand why I get a little impatient with the whole Christian thing once in a while, despite the fact that I know those of you who listen to me know that I have a respect for the Christ. I have a respect for the Gospels, but the whole Christian thing is just like, you know, and it just, they never stop. If it's not Christ, you're going to hell. Well, A, there's no hell, and B, you're wrong. You know, shut up. And you're cursing people when you do that. Okay, so the people who think they're blessing people are actually cursing people. There's your ironic mirror. There's your inversion again. It's everywhere. Once you have the consciousness to see it, it's everywhere. Everywhere. No aspect of our lives escapes it. Not the medicine, not the law, not the science, not the engineering, nothing. You look at some of those old cathedrals in Europe, like Notre Dame, built in the 1100s. What architecture school did they go to? Harvard, Princeton, Yale, Stanford, Northeastern, Oxford, Cambridge. What architecture school did they go to? There were no architecture schools. There was no university degree in architecture. They were just men. Men like my great-grandfather, Johnny Peter, with the balls to get up every day and do an extremely dangerous job and not think twice about it. Extremely physically demanding job and not think twice about it. And you know why? Nobody told them they couldn't do it. This whole modern world we've created is just a big you can't do it now. It's so negative. You know? It's like somebody's cynical, cranky old Jewish grandmother. You can't do that, you idiot. Why not? They did it 1,000 years ago. And when you really start to think about it, the question becomes, how do we undo all these things? You know, when I originally got the idea to build my own house, I started looking at alternative architecture in I don't know, to 2008. Yeah, so that was about 16 years ago. So I guess in my early 40s. I looked at log cabins. I looked at cordwood construction. That's where you cut logs about that watt long, and whatever the width is, it doesn't matter. And you just stack them like bricks and put cement in between, and that's how you build your walls. It's called cordwood construction. And the houses come out quite beautiful. You can put a lacquer on them after you're done. They're quite beautiful. Quite beautiful indeed. That might be how I do my bathroom and my shower, actually, now that I think about it. What else did I look at? You're going to laugh when you hear this. I gave serious consideration to building a big yurt, like a Mongolian yurt. I sourced all the places to order the fabric. It's like thousands of dollars, but that's the most expensive part of the house. You build a wooden platform, you build a wooden frame, and you put the yurt over it. You tie it down. You got your oven in the center to keep it warm in the cold. Because remember, I was originally going to do this in Canada, north of Toronto. And when I saw Earthbag, I went, man, that's genius. You don't even have to cut trees down. You don't have to hurt anything. You're just literally using the earth to build. And I thought that's what I'm going to do. And I bought 20 acres north of Toronto in a town called Sundridge, which is up around Burk's Falls, a little north of Burk's Falls, for those of you who might know it. And I was living in a tiny little $500 trailer I bought with no electricity and no bathroom. I literally went to the woods to take a shit. And I was going to the hardware store and I was getting ready to order all my material and everything. And the building inspector came out, said, "What are you doing?" Gave him a loose idea. He said, "You can't do that." I said, "Well, why not?" Can't do it. This is about the most solid structure you could possibly live in. The walls are 22 inches thick. It's fireproof, floodproof, earthquake-proof, bulletproof. It's about 5 degrees Celsius cooler at midday, like noon, inside this house than it is outside. And then at night, because I'm in the mountains, it cools off quite a bit. It can go down to 17, 18. Tonight I have a jacket on. This is what my wife would call a cold night in Costa Rica. And I guess it's about 16 or 17 degrees Celsius, which, like for us in Canada, is like first week in September, right? Not cold at all. But what happens is the heat that the walls store up during the day is released on the inside of the house. And the inside of the earth bag house is warmer at night, is warmer inside than the climate outside. Somebody told me the Aztecs used to build a similar way with like 22, 24-inch thick walls for the same reason. Cooler in the day and it warms up at night. The walls release the heat at night. I didn't know nothing about the Aztecs when I started this. Yeah, they told me I couldn't build it. Sold the land, got my money back and left. Came to Costa Rica. I was almost done the house completely, and then somebody called the building inspector in Costa Rica, and they came up. The head engineer and the building inspector came up, and they looked at the place, and they went, "Holy shit, man. How'd you build this?" And I had been documenting everything on my cell phone, had hundreds of pictures, showed them how the walls are built, showed them the rebar, showed them the barbed wire. And they said, "Man, this is nearly indestructible." I said, "Buddy, this house will be here in 300 years. You're just going to have to redo the roof every 15, 20, 25 years. He goes, "Wow, we should all build our houses this way." I said, "Yeah, you should." So simple. It's just earth in polypropylene bags. Now for an inferior home with city water run through a filtration system. So basically shit water. No offense, but you're drinking shit water if you live in Toronto or Calgary or anywhere else. I mean, that water is not being fed to your tap from a freshwater spring. It's going through a water filtration system, which is the sewers. You know, if you had a chemistry set up at your house, you'd find all the pharmaceuticals sold in your province or state in your water, minute portions, right? Minute portions. But you're drinking that water your whole life. What's your view? Your view is a brick wall beside you, a brick wall on the other side of you, a backyard, if you're lucky. Oh my goodness, to have a yard these days is a big deal. Backyard in front of you, and then your neighbor's backyard, and then your neighbor's across the street, and then you got the traffic going by. And for that, you're going to pay anywhere between $500,000 and $1 million, depending how many bedrooms it has and where it's at. And I'm telling you, you can build a better home, a more comfortable home, a more aesthetically pleasing home, a more long-lasting home, a more durable home. If your friends help you for a month, you could build a home for $20,000, including the price of the land. Right? $30,000 if you want fancy windows, like and sliding patio doors and stuff like that. How did we make everything so complicated? Why has life become so difficult? I'll give you a hint. It begins with a B and ends with an S in the plural. It begins with a B and ends with a K in the singular. I cannot begin to stress the degree to which the root of all our problems is the banking system. It absolutely is. It's what's forcing us into these wars now. You have to excuse me, I gotta take off the jacket, it's getting a bit hot. It's what's forcing us into all our wars now. It's what artificially manipulates the prices of our homes, our real estate. And don't say you're not in on it, you're in on it, right? Everybody wants to make money on their home when they retire. That's a big part of their retirement package. And then what do? Right? You go get an apartment or a condo and you rent that for $2,500 a month. Live off whatever pension you have and the savings accrued from selling your home. Wondering all the time if you're going to make it. The mental worry. Natives had it better. Well, changed my mind. Plains Indians in North America had a better life 500 years ago than we have today. Changed my mind. You never find your awakened imagination because it's shunned upon in these technological, subservient, serf-based societies. Everybody living in these societies thinks they're better than everybody else. Right? You should see some of the assholes that come down here. I don't see them per se, but I meet them through Facebook groups. Some of these expat Facebook groups in Costa Rica have 250,000 members. The shit you have to read people writing down. It's just like, buddy, holy cow, man. And when people are between cultures, like when they've been out of the US or Canada for 5 or 6 months, they kind of lose their sense of who they were in that society, and they don't quite know who they are here yet. And in that gap space, they speak very honestly. And honestly, they're idiots. You know? Idiots. Just can't get their shit together. Can't figure things out. The average first world person now would not survive out of that system. Or you couldn't take them out. You couldn't take a lawyer out. You couldn't take an architect out. Maybe you could. I don't know. Maybe I'm being a bit hyperbolic. Maybe. I think versatility is a very important thing. The ability to be versatile. Very important thing. What's this show? What's this show again today? Sunday sermon? Oh yeah. I'm actually very hopeful. I see signs that everything's coming back to us again. That we're going to get there. That this human race will not be thrown on the scrap heap. That we will awaken to our innate inner intelligence, our connection to everything. Right? Remember, at the end of the journey for self is God, and at the end of the journey for God is self. And God is everything. It's the trees, it's the rocks, it's the rivers, it's everything. And I do see signs that we're going back in that direction. I really do. Slowly, painfully. And the people kicking and screaming are going to be the people who have invested everything in their title and position in this system we're living in now, so we got to deal with all them. But don't worry about that, because the other side's going to take care of them by robbing all their money. Remember the bail-in legislation in 2015? What do you think they did that for? Remember that after Cyprus? Every IMF member country had to pass bail-in legislation, and every single central banker from one of those countries, in Canada it was a guy named Mark Carney, said, oh, don't worry, we'll never use this. Just like they're never going to use those changes they made to the Uniform Commercial Code, which defines your asset as more the asset of your creditor than you. Okay? Oh, don't worry, we'll never use it. Why would a government go to the bother of... So if they're actually telling the truth, and they'll never use that legislation, they're basically admitting that government itself is a rubber stamp nonsensical institution that doesn't do anything except pass legislation just to fit into international organizations. But don't worry, we'll never use it. I mean, and you know, it's on us for letting them get away with this. It's on us for letting them get away with this. Right? If somebody gave you their lunch money every day, would you stop asking? Why? Why would you stop asking? It's free money. Hey, Jimmy, give me your lunch money. Okay, Bruce. Once I get used to that lunch, why would I stop asking? Right? You folks who listen to me, you're going to be part of the rebuild crew. You're going to be part of the crew of people who can help people out of the old system. Get them into something new. This life is beautiful. I mean, if you end up in a teepee, eating charred venison meat as a means to survive, and you previously had a 4-bedroom home in I don't know, the BC interior, let's say, or Saskatchewan, to use a Canadian example, or Oklahoma. After 3 months of being in that teepee, you'll realize, oh my God, I wasted 25 years in that 4-bedroom home in Oklahoma or Saskatchewan. Trust me. It's all just a head game. It's all just a mind fuck. And you know why people keep doing it? You know why? The main reason? To find a mate. Because the driving force for young men and young women is to find a mate. And society sets the standards for mating. So if society sets the standard that you have to have 2 cars in a 4-bedroom home, then the man is going to go out and try his best, no matter how much stress or deprivation to the cultivation of his awakened imagination that causes him, because the mating impulse is that strong, both for the male and the female. It's one of the main ways that human beings are controlled, right? That's how the whole material game got out of control. It started out as the simplest of dreams, own a home. You know, after World War II, own a home. We're gonna urbanize this society. You can work in a factory. We'll pay you a good wage. And they did. You could own a home, 2 cars, have a cottage, and a fishing boat. All for working at General Motors or Chrysler in the 60s, 70s, and 80s, and even in the 90s. Started to go away in the 90s when we shipped all the auto manufacturing down to Mexico and stuff like that. But just look at the economy we created when we just worked in and among ourselves as Canadians and Americans before free trade. We had a better quality of life. Why did we start accepting all this junk made in fucking Shanghai or the Philippines or Juarez, Mexico? Right? Why did we do that? Because there was a globalist agenda and they used us to do that. Okay? Now labor was too expensive. We had to move it to Mexico. Now Mexico's too expensive. We're moving it to China. Now China's too expensive. We're moving it to the Philippines. Wherever we can get that cheap labor so we can maximize profit. How many people, when they're 12 years old, when you ask a kid, what do you want to be when they grow up? How many look the person who asks the question in the eyes and says, a stockholder? Why, Jimmy? Why do you want to be a stockholder? Because they're the only ones the corporations work for. That would be the smartest answer you could give in the 7th grade. Mary, what do you want to be? I want to be an actress. Billy, what do you want to be? I want to be a fireman. Jimmy, what do you want to be? I want to be a stockholder. Because they're the only people treated with respect in the corporate globalist world. They'll do anything to make me money. But you can see, just in that comical little imaginative exercise of transposing that realization to a 12-year-old kid in the 7th grade, you can see just how ridiculous it is, right? Who would dream to grow up to be a stockbroker? Why? Because you're not doing anything. Right? And nobody can afford stocks anymore. These companies aren't commonly owned anymore. They're all owned by hedge funds. Right? And the hedge funds are secondary brokers for the banks who don't want to manage their own money. It's all just a big joke now. It's a big house of cards. A strong wind will blow it all down, and it is being blown down now. And it's a good thing. We're going to look back on these days and we're going to realize that the World Economic Forum and all these globalists did us a favor. They're not going to win and get their way. The world they want is not coming onto this planet. It can't. The vibration does not suit it. We're going up in vibration. We're going up in consciousness. There's no way we're going to go backwards in terms of social order if consciousness is going upwards. But when all is said and done, we're going to look back on this and we're going to go, it was the World Economic Forum and the globalists who snapped us out of the material nightmare of first world economies and got us back to living. And none of these problems are even problems. All these problems are invented by law. Oh, organized crime is a big, big problem. Yeah, because the law prevents us from slitting their throats because we good people don't want to go to jail. That's how the law is the problem. You think the Cosa Nostra would exist if the police who were corrupt and bought out by the organized crime? You think the cartels would exist in Mexico if the law didn't arrest people who fought against them, which it does? They wouldn't exist because there's more good people than bad people. There's more people who want to live honestly than there are people who want to kill people for a living. It's always been this way. The thing that fucked us up was the institutions. Because they came in and they're dishonest brokers and they get bribed and everything goes to shit because the average people can't change anything anymore. That revolutionary force I talked about in last night's podcast, Saturday Night Fever, using William Wallace as the example, it can't happen anymore. You're the bad guy if you do that. You're a domestic terrorist. You're a white supremacist. Or now they'll start saying black nationalist and black terrorist because the black people have caught on, which I find brilliant, which is why I think everything is changing. I knew I had another podcast in me today. Anyways, that's enough, I think. I got to get on to other things. I didn't even open the chat or look at the chat tonight. If you've been sending me messages, I apologize. Sometimes I just want to do the podcast, okay? And I love you guys, man. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you again tomorrow. I'm Bruce McDonald, and this has been the Talamanca Review.